Hello everyone, my name is Jackie Greenwood and I am the Director of Education and Wellbeing and a DHA licensed counsellor here at Vivamus in Dubai. And this presentation that I'm presenting to you means that you're probably here because your children are about to leave home for usually college or university or the military, or indeed work. And the presentation today is turning the empty nest into an opportunity for growth. The reason why this presentation has both a personal connection for me as well as professional interest is that recently I have been in the situation of having both children, now adults, having left home for university in the UK. And it's an interesting time in terms of observing both the emotional experience of children leaving and the changing role in relationship with them. It's also a time in life when other major transitions may well be happening at the same time. For example, menopause, changes in jobs, changing in relationships with our own parents, and recognizing that although this concept of the empty nest is one that we're all familiar with, and it's not actually a diagnosable psychological condition, I think we all recognize it as a phenomenon that involves grief and loss and anxiety. So today's presentation is really to sort of inform more around what is it, what's the experience of it, how do we best manage it, and how do we help support our young adults as they also are going through this major transition and separation. So if we take a moment to think back to the earlier days of parenting, perhaps the first days of school or kindergarten, and recognizing some of the emotions that might have been around at that time, perhaps excitement that they were starting school, perhaps some relief that you might finally have some time and space for yourself, but also maybe a little bit of heartache, that recognizing that you wouldn't now have full responsibility for them and that you might miss them if they were at school. And I also, can look back at my own children, my own sons, when they were starting school, that although I might have been quite happy and willing for them to go, they themselves were not ready to separate. And I can remember quite strong emotional reactions of tears and I don't want tos as I would take them to their kindergarten and not wanting to leave me. And now I think we can think about the opposite of that sense of now they're fully grown, that they might be ready and willing to leave and maybe can't wait to leave and begin their adult life. And yet we, the parents, are left with that sense of that loss of they're finally going and they're about to set foot into their adult life, which we might hold some excitement about, some sense of pride, but also a sense of loss. The feeling of where am I right now in terms of my role? We all relate to how busy it is as a parent, even in the later years of school, in terms of transport, feeding them, supervision, being the coach, being the counsellor, being the medic, being the guide. And now what? Now what once they've left? So just to put this in the context of my own experience, this is my older son, the day that I dropped him at university a couple of days ago. He's quite composed, quite settled. Me, on the other hand, about to, let go, feeling of the kind of tightness in the throat, heart, feeling an ache and a pang, knowing that I wouldn't be seeing him probably for 3 months or so. So a sense of like this awareness of, whoa, there's some pretty strong emotions that are kind of bubbling up, but also recognizing that that's normal, that's actually part of this kind of transition. It's a normal transition, and it can be tinged with some pain, maybe a little bit of loss. But we can also recognize that this child, as he is now, was once this little boy, and although on the outside there's maybe composure, we can also think about what is this journey like for them as they're about to leave their family, they're leaving their home, they're leaving the country in which they've been educated. So it's a more complex transition for them, because they're not just heading to university 2 hours away necessarily. They're actually getting on an aeroplane, and they're maybe going to be 10 hours away. So this is also recognizing that on the outside it might seem okay, but on the inside for them, they also might be going through a more complex transition. And so being aware, being able to hold both your own experience, but also being able to still be present and not making assumptions that their transition is easier because it feels like they're ready to leave, when maybe inside they're still that little girl or little boy with the same types of anxieties that they had when they were leaving for nursery school. Will I make friends? Will I be successful? Will I be able to juggle the responsibilities of independent adult life and study? Where will I get my emotional support from? They also will be carrying a lot of big questions, which we as parents can still continue to support, if not from close up in the family home, but from afar. So when we think about this emptiness, we typically think about when all of our children are left. It may be that your first child is left, or your second, or your third, and if there's one still at home, it's not yet full empty nest, although you might still experience some big feelings around this, that maybe the oldest child has left, and now it's maybe kind of having an impact on the family. When I was talking with a family the other day, they were saying, oh, when the oldest child leaves, that's going to be hard, because the oldest child has been the peacekeeper between the younger children. And so there's probably going to be more conflict when they leave. So recognizing that when one child leaves, it does create a shift as well in the roles within the family and the relationships. But when we typically think about the emptiness, we're thinking about the adults that are left behind, and this sense of, what's my purpose? What is the role that I now play as the parent? All that time, as I mentioned earlier, spent in caregiving, in providing support, physical support, psychological support, educational, healthcare. All of those functions that we had as parent are now mute. Those needs might be met elsewhere. The one thing we can be certain of is that financial support will still be there. So our purpose is to be a provider still, for certain. But also what we find is that we can have a sense of frustration, that there's potentially this loss of control. And that loss of control being that we can no longer regulate or be aware or supervise their movements. So letting go of the fact that we will not be able to control if they arrive at their lectures on time, or indeed whether they even show up. We cannot regulate or enforce or supervise their academic attainment and how well they're doing. We may not even know what that reality is. We may also be in a situation that we have to let go of the reality for what our young person might be doing outside of university hours, whether they're drinking, whether they're in relationship. Are they safe? Are they making good, wise choices? Are they managing their money appropriately? Are they cooking for themselves? What is it that they're eating? Are they having breakfast cereal every day? Are they ordering takeaways? Are they not really looking after themselves? So this loss of control, the role that we played as parents to supervise, to support, to be present, we've now handed over that control to them. And sometimes what can happen is anxiety then starts to swell, and that can then lead to maybe over control, maybe parents who then feel that they have to become, more present and demanding contact, frequent check-ins daily. And just recognizing that that's maybe coming from a need to manage anxiety as opposed to a need that the young person needs for support. And that in itself can sometimes feel a bit overwhelming for them, that they have their parents who are trying to helicopter parent them from afar or even drone parent them. I think it's really important that young people feel that their parents are able to stand back, but stand not too far away, that they know that they can be called upon. So coupled with that, as I've just been saying, that anxiety sometimes can lead to some emotional distress, and sometimes, fears about, especially, having, if you have daughters, like safety levels are often a concern for parents who are sending their child overseas to the US or Europe or Australia, that the levels of safety may shift, and that worry that can keep you up at night when you've not heard from your child is, are they safe? And so just recognizing, okay, how do I ensure that my young person has the kind of almost like the street smarts, the know-how, like how would they recognize red flags? Have I done my part as parents to talk to my child about what those red flags might be? Like throwing out some hypotheticals, that if you go to a bar and you're offered drugs, what would you do? If you're drinking, be aware that people spike the drinks. Be aware not to put your drinks down, because of that. Being aware of public transport and never traveling alone, really kind of just using opportunities for meaningful conversation. And I think sometimes the realities for young adults is that they think it won't happen to me. They're quite hedonistic. They believe that that's something that happens to other people, not themselves. But giving them a bit of a reality check, that they do need to be aware, they need to be vigilant, they don't need to be overly worried about it, but they do need to be aware that things can happen, and that you as parent is still there as their protector as and when that's needed. So it's really important to recognize, what is the distress? Is the distress anxiety and worry? Is it sadness? Is it that feeling of emptiness because of that loss of purpose and loss of control? And when I know what that distress is, then I can figure out what are going to be the most compassionate ways and helpful, constructive ways that will help me through this. Because again, this is a normal rite of passage. Many parents, if not all, will face this to varying degrees of intensity. Now, we've talked about some of the anxiety that we might hold about our children, particularly around safety and the changing environment. But some of that anxiety might also be because you've had worries and concerns for years about your child, maybe because they've had a learning difficulty, or they've had social problems and friendship problems, maybe found it hard to make friends, maybe they're highly disorganized and you've been trying to teach them how to use a washing machine for years, or how to cook, and they still don't get it. Or maybe your young person has had mental health challenges and your anxiety is about how are they going to cope. And I think on that, I think it's really important to recognize that they're not on their own when they make this journey. They will typically be sharing an apartment and residence with maybe upwards of 5 to 20 other young people, some of whom may also have similar struggles, and they work together to help each other through it. So it's not an isolated journey. The support at university is much stronger than when I went to university, and perhaps when you went to university. universities and colleges are more mentally health aware and responsive than they used to be. And indeed, the National Union of Students also do so much work in the first term to help the transition, to help with friendship activities, to be there as advice givers and problem solvers. So there's a lot of support there. The biggest helpful message is to encourage your child to take and accept help, to ask for help, to take the help when it's offered, that they've got more chance of success and happiness if they don't see this as a singular journey and that they're not on their own. Now, we also know, as I mentioned earlier, that when a child or children leave, the emptiness can sometimes create friction because of that loss of purpose and loss of control. And it may expose problems that have existed within the couple relationship. Many parents, couples that I see in therapy often stay together for their children, to provide that stable family environment. And when children leave, sometimes that creates the space for the adults to begin to explore, what do we want? Do we want to be together or not? Can we work through our difficulties? Do we need to see somebody? Do we want to separate? And so this can create another level of difficulty that can be supported. I think it's important to recognise that this also is a part of this major change and transition that people are going through, and one in which people can be supported through it, and recognising that this is a kind of, it's inevitable that when there's more time and less time distracted by children, that can create that level of exposure and vulnerability, and within that an opportunity to seek help. Now, we know that some people who are going through this can struggle more, and I think I've sort of hit one of the big ones already, really. So where there has been a couple relationship where parents have not been getting along potentially for a long time, the emptiness can have a bigger impact because perhaps the children have represented solace and support and friendship, and when they go, that support also goes. So I think it's important to recognise that. I think parents who've not worked and were being the parent and the chief executive officer at home, that this has been your job. And when children leave, there is a big kind of existential crisis about what now? Can I get a job? Do I have the skills? What now? And that can lead to quite a lot of identity confusion. And sometimes it can also lead to a continued over-involvement in the life of your children, whilst you're sort of questing to find the what else. And that can lead to some challenges, because inevitably the children are leaving so that they can become independent and separate. Also, for those parents where you have had that high level of involvement in terms of perhaps a bit more of the micromanagement, being engaged heavily in academics, sporting life, relationships, that loss of control can be quite overwhelming. And additionally, what we find from the reading about empty nest syndrome, if you like, is perhaps adults that struggled themselves at university and college and didn't have a good experience for one reason or another, that can add to that layer of anxiety. And people who went to university, they themselves might have had a traumatic experience, or they maybe didn't do well at university. It maybe wasn't the right place, it wasn't the right course, it wasn't a good experience. That can then colour the hopefulness and optimism that can be there for our youngsters, especially if you're a parent that had an amazing time at university and there's a little bit of that, I wish it was me again, I wish I could have that time again. So just recognizing, actually, would I be more at risk of struggling more for this? But just like anything, you know, when we have a loss in our life, whether it's something related to a relationship loss or something physically and health related, whether it's a financial loss, that sometimes that loss can also create an opportunity. And especially if it's a kind of a process that you can take yourself through in terms of reflection, like what now? What matters to me now? Where do I feel most alive? What am I interested in that perhaps I sacrificed because of time that I just didn't have when the children were at home? And so seeing this as an opportunity really to discover maybe some new parts of yourself that were put on hold for a long time. I think too, when we think about frustration or lack of control, that just recognizing that in yourself, you probably know that you have this tendency. And if this is there for you, even you might find now that perhaps you're over involved in the decision making about which university or what course or where they should live or how they should spend their money, that actually our best approach is just to help them make their decisions. We listen to them to find out what's important for them. We offer by invitation advice. So would you like some input? Would you like my advice? Can I guide you? How about we kind of weigh this up together, like do a bit of a cost benefit analysis rather than it being you telling them how things are, because of course university and college has changed dramatically since maybe you went 20 years ago. So when it comes to them actually leaving, I think this can be a really big challenge for parents, is around our expectations as to how much they'll be in contact. They say no news is good news. However, when you've been used to having frequent communication with your child every single day, and then they leave and you maybe don't hear from them for a while, there's many emotions that go on. One is, am I even important? You know, do they not need me? Or it might be, wow, they're doing okay. They must be fine if they're not reaching out. So sometimes getting a kind of a baseline of how much communication do you think will be reasonable? And so it might be, okay, we'll always have a family call on a Sunday. We'll always do a Zoom call then. We'll make sure on the family chat that if there's a communication that you read it. You know, you don't necessarily have to respond to it, but read it so that we know that there's actually, that there is, you are there and that there is a presence. And I think it's also recognizing and being compassionate that our expectations of their communication are compromised because we don't necessarily know how busy they are going to be. They will be busy with their timetable, getting to know their way around the university, making many new friends, figuring out the geography of the landscape, like where's the shops, how do I do my laundry, where am I going to buy my food from, what am I going to cook? All of these decisions take up not only their time but their energy. Now it may well be that you have a young person, a child that is on the phone with you 3 or 4 times a day, and I might suggest that perhaps that's too much, and that might also be an indicator that they're kind of not fully present in their life at university, but they're living in both, and it's that balance. And what is that need for them? Is there homesickness? Is there a feeling of dependency still? So recognizing what might be going on there, so you can best kind of guide them in terms of them building their support network, building their team where they are in situ. So, as I've said, and I've certainly experienced some of these feelings as I've been transitioning through the empty nest. One son left just this year, and the other one left the year before. That it is kind of like riding waves. Sometimes there's a wave, a gentle wave of peace, like, whoa, the house is so calm and the house is tidy all the time. And then there's a wave of emptiness, a wave of like, whoa, it's so quiet, it's so empty. I miss the noise. I miss the call, like, Mum, can you pick me up? So there is that sense of feeling a kind of quietness, and in that quietness, sense of maybe a little bit of feeling that loss and missing. And I've noticed a time now where I'm looking back a lot. I'm recalling memories from their early childhood, times that I had not really paid that much attention to in recent years because it's been really busy parenting teens. So there's been these pockets as well of kind of almost like reconnecting with some really happy memories. So it is definitely a kind of a seasons that you go through with regard to this empty nest. And although it's normal, it doesn't make it necessarily easier. There's just this sense that it will get easier as you become more confident that they're okay, and that you then begin to take pride in them enjoying their life and developing and changing. As I said earlier, if you are in a relationship now that has been struggling for a long time, it is not too late to be able to learn how to reconnect and find love and indeed passion again with your partner now that your children have flown the coop. Relationships need attention, and they're often neglected during this caretaking experience of our children. We place our children first. And so inevitably our partner becomes secondary, even though they're very important to us. And so if something's been neglected, it needs to be attended to, it needs to be nurtured. And so use this time too as a reflection about being a partner, and actually could this partnership be strengthened with some psychological therapeutic support, or even just by having the time to enjoy one another and rediscover what is it that we're interested in, what is it that we'd like to do together that we just didn't have time or energy or capacity for before. So using this time as an opportunity to reconnect. And if it's clearly not an opportunity to reconnect, but an opportunity to separate, then even then, the children, they're still children. This is a process that I would recommend needs to be guided, and you both feel held through that process in terms of making wise decisions for your future. Now, I find that as a parent, the hardest thing about parenting is managing our own emotions. And I think in this situation, I've noticed even from my own son, sometimes a WhatsApp coming through, how are you? And there's an importance, I feel, in letting them know that we're okay. You don't need to worry about us. We just want you to enjoy your life. We're doing fine. We're doing okay, although we miss you and it's hard. And so I think if there's anxiety coming up, maybe that anxiety is kind of flooding out a little bit, and perhaps your feelings are perhaps leading to worrying type behavior, like maybe pressing your child for information or maybe making high demands of them. Then it's recognizing that perhaps that anxiety is coupled with some overthinking, like, are they safe? Waking up in the night, worrying that something terrible is happening to them. Also remembering that this might be hitting you at a time of life when maybe you're going through other things like health concerns, menopause, demands at work, pressures from parents and extended family. And that when we are anxious, being aware that it really affects our behavior. It might mean that you've started to withdraw and cut yourself off from social situations. It might mean that you are struggling, like making decisions, feeling quite overwhelmed, being quite hyper alert, sensitive, feeling quite tearful, getting upset by minor problems. And when we notice this, we can sometimes really tune in physically and think, whoa, am I having trouble sleeping? Am I noticing breathlessness? Am I feeling like I'm agitated and fidgety? Am I noticing that I'm having frequent upset stomachs? Recognizing that even in the empty nest season, this normal transition, these symptoms of anxiety can come on. And what we recognize is that when there's loss, if it's not managed and managed well and attended to, then it can spiral and lead to anxiety. And I think that also these signs here, these early warning signs, are really helpful, not just for ourselves in wondering, am I okay? But also recognizing if my child at university is okay, because they might also be masking, covering up because they don't want you to worry. So here's just sort of 10 different categories to kind of like when you're talking with your child, when you're seeing your child online, sometimes it's not even a direct question. You just maybe get a sense that they look withdrawn, or maybe their motivation seems low, or maybe their concentration seems out. So just recognizing that we can notice, we can pay attention to these early warning signs so that we indeed can take some action, some wise action that can lead to help and support. Now, if your child is struggling at university, it's really important for us as parents not to kind of overreact and not to panic. We know that young people at university can have many different challenges. Academic, it's the wrong course, I don't like it, I think I've made a bad decision, to I've just had my first relationship, we've separated, I'm brokenhearted, I'm depressed, to challenges with housemates and conflict and friction, to perhaps getting into too much partying and drinking, and that then leading to other types of difficulties. So when our children struggle, the most important thing that we can create for them is a safe harbour, that they feel that if they call home and say, Mom, Dad, something's happened, you can respond calmly and not reactively, and just start with, tell us what's happened without interruption. Just listen. And then notice how you're feeling. And you might be feeling angry, you might be feeling worried, you might be feeling sad, but just allowing yourself to notice that whatever you're feeling, times that by 100 in terms of how much courage your child has had to ring you up and tell you. So if you stay calm, if you create that safe harbour, then that also helps them settle and makes them feel secure. And then it allows that big question, like, how can we help? What do you need? That's really important. What do you need from us? Tell us what we can do to help right now. This is what we're thinking. How does that sound? Now, most times young people often hear their parents say, don't worry, we'll come and get you. But that might be the last thing that they need. So don't necessarily rush to rescue them. So being aware that your anxiety can be a contagion, that because of your anxiety, your young person might feed off that and might worry, and it might actually begin to overwhelm them because they're already dealing with their issues. So being able to kind of take this time to help with your own settling of your emotions, whether that's through going to the gym, whether that's by mindfulness or yoga practice or other forms of healing or therapy, whatever helps you as the adult remain able to respond to your own strong feelings, but also when and if your young person needs that support, you can respond from that place of safety and calm and stability. Now, my son did give me permission to use this photo. This was just as we'd finished unpacking his room and I was about to leave, and I was doing that final check-in. Are you good? Are you ready for me to go? And as you can see, he's feeling quite relaxed, quite calm, but I did notice that the smile or lack of it on his face. And I said to him, I believe in you. I know that things might not always be easy. Home is always home. How are you doing right now? And he's like, Mom, don't worry, I'm good. And that was my permission. That was my signal to go. So we had a final hug until the next time. And it was that feeling of both relief. Wow, we got him there. He's finally arrived in a place where he wants to be, studying what he wants to study, and now it's over to him. And I think that that sense of like optimism, that belief that they're going to be okay, for the most young people, they're definitely going to be more than okay. But it's also important to recognize that they will inevitably struggle, whatever it is that comes their way. There will be something that will test their resolve. And them just knowing that home is always the safe harbor, the place that is a safe place for them, both in terms of emotional support, practical support, but also that it's separate from them now, that it is there for them as they need it. I think that's an important recognition. So that kind of concludes the sort of end of the empty nest information. But I think in terms of flourishing and coping, hopefully, many of you are already taking action and thinking about this, but this is a great opportunity if you're in your 50s like me to use this time to look after your health and be able to refocus attention on yourself, to be able to nurture friendships that have maybe been neglected for a while, perhaps friendships that you let go of. This is an opportunity to reconnect or even start new friendships and new activities and interests. It's certainly an opportunity to fully focus your attention on your partner. And if you're alone, and maybe you don't have a partner, to begin to start to explore new relationships. Anything that you've put on hold, do it. Start it now while you have the time, while you have the will, while you have the energy. Do it. That's excellent role modeling for your young people as well. And remember, this isn't a relationship that's over with your child. They're still adolescents until the age of 24. That's when their brain is fully developed. And you may, in fact, really begin to appreciate how the relationship begins to kind of shift a little bit. They might even buy you dinner, which is what happened to me at the last visit I made, which was a great surprise. And indeed, if it is feeling overwhelming, no judgment. That could be there for many different reasons in terms of why this loss is feeling harder. Reach out. Support is available. I'm here. Lots of other practices will offer support to adults in this area. So wonderful books out there. This is one of them that you can't actually probably see it that clearly, but the book's called Walking on Eggshells, Navigating the Delicate Relationship Between Adult Children and Parents by Jane Isay. I've just read that book. So Walking on Eggshells, Jane Isay, I-S-A-Y. Please feel free to discover new knowledge, new awareness by reading these books that I've advised you to take a look at just here. So that's it from me, Jackie Greenwood at Vivamus. It's been my pleasure just sharing some personal insights and some of the knowledge gained that I've acquired in the last year. I hope very much that it's helpful to you and to your children that are about to embark on an exciting journey ahead. Best wishes.